EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, to Tuesday's edition of Birds 365, Devonte Parker Retirement Day for all who celebrate. Johnny Mac, good Tuesday morning to you, sir. Eagles OTAs officially underway. Devonte Parker on the way out. How you doing this morning?
Doing well. Yeah, we hardly knew him. What was your favorite moment of the Devonte Parker era, Zander?
I can't say I have one, other than the one catch I remember is the one when he was a Dolphin and he caught one against
Wow,
the
he had a
Eagles.
big game against the Eagles.
Yeah, I forget what year that was, but
2 touchdowns, 2019. That was his
Yeah.
best season by
Yeah.
far. At 150 plus yards, 7 receptions.
There you go. Ian E says, time to retire the Parker's jersey number. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy Kempski had a good pull. Jatavis Brown, I always, I forget him. He was one of those linebackers they bring in, they talk up, and he retired in August. Frank Gore's an obvious one. Miles Jack last season. And I don't know if Devontae's going to stay in retirement, but the contract tells you a lot. I always say it. 1 year, 1.21 million. There was no guarantee he was going to make the team. In our 53 yesterday, we did our too early 53 projection. I left him off.
Yeah.
I said it was between him and Paris Campbell. Paris Campbell, who, by the way, only got 1 year, 1.3 million. So he's by no means safe either. But of those two, he was a better fit. Paris Campbell's a better fit because he's more of a slot guy. Devonte Parker, for those that would say be in the third wide receiver conversation, even if he didn't retire, I don't think he would have ever been in that conversation because to me, he's strictly an outside guy. But it was a strange signing. I remember at the time talking about it with Jody, and I said, this one doesn't make sense to me. It was very early too, March 14th.
Super early.
A small contract. It didn't make a lot of sense to me, and it didn't work out. So that part of it's not surprising. But they got plenty of big bodies but none of them are accomplished to potentially take his place. And if you're talking about veteran guys coming in, well, they already proved they wanted a veteran by signing him and signing Paris Campbell. But, again, very cost effective. Doesn't seem like they want to bend over backwards. So never say never about bringing in a veteran guy. John Ross, it'll start there. They had him at rookie camp, and we'll see pretty quickly if they liked what they saw or didn't like what they saw. Probably more so didn't, but otherwise he'd already be here. But they might bring in a veteran, but they'll try to get a look at these young guys. They got a boatload of big receivers they brought in on futures deals. Jacob Harris, Shaq Davis, Austin Watkins. These are not familiar names, but a couple of them are 6'5". Watkins is 6'3". They're all big.
A lot of these big boys, yeah.
And Johnny Wilson, who they drafted, is 6'6". So they got a bunch of guys, and they'll look at them and see if anybody's ready.
Is it fair for me to think that they're going to probably favor those draft picks just because they're young, they're drafted by the Eagles, like Ainias? I really could see Ainias being that slot receiver. I don't know if he's going to be a good player. Obviously, he just got drafted, but if he shows anything, I could see them going that route.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, they're going to be on the team, and Smith,
I know they're going to be on the
Wilson
team. I'm talking about in that wide receiver 3 spot.
Well, I still think the favorite, and we're going to get down there tomorrow. The favorite still should be Paris Campbell, but it's hard to say he's going to completely lock down that job. He's been in the league for 5 years and hasn't done much. Had one decent season in Indianapolis. 1 out of 5 is not a good batting average. So, and as I said, he's making 1.3 million. So it's not like they're tethered to Paris Campbell, but it'll be his job to lose. And can Ainias Smith beat him out? I would say yes, but I would also say, be cautious of the day 3 picks. We've been talking, they're 5th round picks for a reason.
Yeah.
Not a slam dunk for Anaya Smith. I will say that.
Yeah, shout out to Barbara Carroll, who was the linebacker last year. That was Miles Jack, who was signed by the Eagles and was retired before the season started. So good pull there, Barb. John, any chance that and you just opinion, or if I'm not sure if you have any sources that are familiar with the Eagles thinking on this, but any chance they would try and make a splash trade? Not a huge splash, but a John Mechie, somebody that's out there on an Eagles roster or on another NFL roster that would be more of a, I don't want to say bona fide, but a better, higher upside wide receiver 3 that they could slot in and potentially have for a couple years.
Saquon in the slot. What do you need? What do you need to go out and spend? No, you never say never with this team. Do they need a big meaning? I think you saw their thought process, 1.2 million, 1.3 million.
Right.
Those are the kind of guys, again, traffic becomes a big deal. You got to get the ball to AJ. You got to get the ball to Devonte. You got to get the ball to Dallas Goedert. You got to get the ball to Saquon Barkley. And now you're going to bring in somebody else, high profile or needing of some traffic, and not that John is that high profile, but so I think, the fact that Devonte Parker was here indicates that they're willing to bring in a veteran guy. If it's anything more than 1 year at the veteran minimum, probably not, or a little bit more than a veteran minimum, probably not.
Yeah, Devonte Parker hangs him up. 9 years for Devonte Parker, 7 in Miami, 2 in New England. Decent career. I think he didn't live up to his expectations.
14th overall pick.
Yeah, 14th overall pick. But he almost had 6,000 yards. Decent player that one season where he had, I think, 12 or 1,300. I think that was the 2019 year you had mentioned. So decent player, but we're never going to see him in Eagle Green. So everybody, that ship has sailed. Devonte Parker hangs it up to spend some time with his family. So good on him for that. I'm going to welcome everybody into the chat. We got an early start today. We got Bill Colarulo coming up right at the top of the hour here. John and Mac, I want to get your quick thoughts. Wednesday, now you're going to have a full practice, a full OTA.
Shocker.
We've been talking about it. You're only going to have a couple minutes, but it looks like you guys are going to have a look at the full OTA on Wednesday. What are you looking forward to down there?
Well, now, I am looking forward to it because now we'll get to see which guys are defaulting and where they're going to start and at these particular positions. Now, the history of Nick Sirianni is he's going to defer to the veteran player or the guy who's been here a little bit to start and make sure that rookies earn their keep, so to speak. I'm going to be interesting to see if James Bradbury's there. Remember, this stuff is voluntary. I would not, if I were James, I would not show up. I would not recommend it if I were his agent. So that gives you, if that's the way it shakes out, that gives you a chance to get a look at some of the younger guys. And it wouldn't surprise me if Kaylee Ringo got the first rep over Quinyon Mitchell just because he's been here.
Yeah.
Or Cooper DeJean. Tyler Steen obviously is going to get the first rep at right guard, but it's going to be interesting to see who the next guy is and where they're starting there. And the complication there is Matt Hennessy, and everybody saying, well, if Matt Hennessy's healthy. Well, Matt Hennessy is also the backup center. So if he's taking center reps with the second team, it's going to be really difficult for him to take right guard reps. I don't know. He'd be quite the magician if he can do that. So there's some complications on how they're going to go about that particular position. And then, some of Vic's packages, which he's not going to unfold right away, but he has said pretty consistently he's going to throw a lot at these players early and see what they can pick up and sort of mold it down from there. So you're going to see some of his schemes and some of the big nickel, I imagine. And it's only one day, but just where guys are lining up will tell you a lot.
Let's get to our friend Bill Colarulo waiting in the green room. We have an early start. Bill Colarulo joining us now. Let me bring Bill up. Bill, welcome to the show, man. How you doing today?
What's going on, boys? How are you?
Good, man.
Bill, good to see you.
Good to see you as always, Johnny.
You excited? On-field OTAs, phase 3. So the Eagles started Monday, but we were not allowed in there as reporters. We will be Wednesday, and we're going to get to see the whole practice, which is a little bit of a surprise to us. And thank you, Eagles. I'll say that publicly. We'll get to see some of the default settings, where the Eagles want to start at some of these competition positions, so to speak. What's the most interesting part of that for you from a competition standpoint?
I'm excited to see the defense, especially the secondary. There's just so many bodies back there. And I heard you before I came in talking about, does James Bradbury show up or not? But even without him, 13 other guys may be in there, even if JB doesn't show up. So I'm excited to see how they're going to use all of these pieces. I'm not expecting them to just anoint Quinyon Mitchell day one. I think they're going to make him earn that spot. So I think Keely Ringo probably starts outside with Darius Slay. And I think Keely's got a shot at winning it. We talked about this before, John. I'm excited to see what Quinyon can do, but I'm not ruling out Keely Ringo. I like the way he came on at the end of last season, but that's the position I'm most excited to see, the secondary battle. And OTAs, we'll learn a little bit, but I'm real excited this year for training camp preseason because there's just so many positions where people are battling. We don't know who's going to be the starters outside. We're not sure how they're going to use Cooper DeJean, who's your starting defensive ends. So obviously linebacker, another question. So there's still a lot of question marks where it should be fun. And then even on offense, third wide receiver, right guard, although I think Tyler Steen's got the inside track. So it should be fun as we head up to week 1, game 1 in Brazil to see some of these position battles.
Yeah, it should be pretty good stuff. You pointed out a couple of the good ones there. No Devonte Parker now, so you can take him out of the wide receiver 3 mix. Bill, what do you think? I want to go to the defensive line. You started on the defense. Me and Johnny Mack kicked this around a little bit yesterday. We're not going to learn everything about it, obviously, from OTAs, but we're putting a lot on Bryce Huff, which he's almost become an afterthought, but he's got a big role to fill, big shoes to fill. Hassan Reddick was a highly productive pass rusher on this Eagles team. Are you confident Bryce can fill that role? And if he can't, it's on Nolan Smith to step up and pick up that dead weight, yes?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, I'm not confident that he can do it. I don't know how anyone could be confident. We've never seen him play more than half the snaps. Even Vic Fangio said it when he spoke, saying, yeah, he was kind of a part-time player in New York. So we're all hopeful he can take that leap, but there's no guarantee. But I think you're right. The Eagles are hoping that they can replace the production from Hassan Reddick with Bryce Huff and or Nolan Smith, maybe the combination. But whatever they do, they need more depth there. You saw it last year. Once you weren't getting anything from Derek Barnett, and then they made the decision to cut him, which I was okay with when they did it. I know some fans saw him in Houston and thought they never should have cut him. He stunk here. But once you did that, you had no depth. You weren't getting anything from Nolan Smith last year. You cut Derek Barnett. Josh Sweat and Hassan Reddick had to play over 800 snaps apiece. Now, Reddick had done that before. He had played substantial snaps before, but Sweat had never played that much in the past, and you saw him hit a wall. So Bryce Huff needs to play more than half the snaps, but even if he does that, you still need Nolan Smith to step up because as much as I love Brandon Graham, he'll play probably 25, 30% of the snaps if we're lucky. He'll give it his all when he's in there, but that's pretty much it. And then you have Josh Sweat in a contract year now, so I'm sure he'll be giving it his all. And then we all thought Zach Bond was going to rotate in on the edge.
That's an interesting one.
But then Fangio says inside linebacker. That threw me off.
And I should have mentioned when I started, when I asked you at first, I mean, that to me, and you brought up the defense first, Bill, Zach Bond, where he's going to line up, because Howie compared him to Andrew Van Ginkel, how Vic used him in Miami, and that was an edge guy. And then Vic says, oh, we think he can play all ball linebacker, so that's going to be interesting. And then Isaiah Rodgers, the great Isaiah Rodgers. Where's he going to start? Is he going to be in the slot? Is he going to be outside? So those two players are interesting.
Yeah, so I do some stuff with Andrew DeCecco a lot now on the Fanatic.
Yeah, my guy, man.
Andrew's been saying, to his credit, even before they drafted Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, Andrew was saying he didn't think Isaiah Rodgers was a lock to even make this team.
No.
So
yeah, we've
now
had that discussion many times.
Yeah. So now that they've added those two pieces, he still feels that Isaiah Rodgers doesn't make the team. Now, I was intrigued. I was excited. I mean, candidly, none of us watched a lot of him because he didn't play that much in Indianapolis. But when he did, he looked really good in the times that he got on the field. It was all outside. I know we've had this conversation before, you and I, John, about he projects more as maybe a slot corner with his size and his position.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the plan is with him. And that's another one that I'm excited to see come this OTAs. Where do they have him working in all through training camp? Because it's going to be hard for him, I think, to win the outside corner role. But if he can transition to the slot corner, obviously they brought back Avonte Maddox, but can you rely on a guy who's played 12 games in 2 seasons? You got Zach McPherson. We don't know how he's going to bounce back from the Achilles tear. He's not guaranteed to make this team. So I don't know, man. I mean, there's exciting storylines as we head into OTAs in the offseason.
Yeah, that brings me to Cooper. Me and Johnny Mac did our early 53-man projection. Poor Zach McPherson. He was nowhere to be found on our 53-man projection. But what do you make of the safety position, Bill? I know people talk about maybe they'll move Cooper DeJean, play some safety. They do have some good bodies there. I like Sidney Brown, Reed Blankenship, obviously C.J. Gardner-Johnson they brought in. But I think they're a little shallow there. I mean, if we're talking about big nickel, 3 safeties on the field, are they going to bring another body in? Johnny Mac and I kicked around some Justin Simmons signing, potentially going that route. What do you think of the safety position, and do you think they need to add to that room?
I think they need to add to the room for some depth. The starters could be pretty good with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson if you slide Cooper DeJean there. You still have Reed Blankenship. I know John has said before Sidney Brown looks way ahead of schedule with regard to recovering from that ACL tear. So I think the position could be good as far as the starters, but you have no depth. And we've seen Chauncey Gardner-Johnson played 2 games last season, got hurt 2 years ago when he was here with the Eagles. Reed Blankenship's never played a 17-game season. Sidney Brown, we don't know. He got hurt last year a couple times. So I think they need to add some depth to that room because, God forbid, one of those guys goes down. And I think Cooper DeJean slides into the safety role, but we don't know. Another storyline, he talked about how they've started him at outside and nickel. I'm just as confused as to what the plan is at the safety position behind those 3 guys, but I'd like to see Cooper DeJean move there. But I've been reading a lot and hearing some other analysts talk about why would you move Cooper DeJean? His whole career he's played outside corner. He has the capability of playing outside corner. When you look at him, he just looks like, and not because of the color of his skin. I've had some people say, oh, that's just because he's a white guy. You think he has to play safety?
Poor Jeff asked the question. Jeff McMullen.
I just think you look at his athleticism, his versatility, and his ability to kind of play downside, inside the box. He just looks like he'd be a great safety.
Well, I'll say this about Cooper. I think the Eagles feel that he is smart enough, versatile enough to handle a bunch of different stuff. So I think from their perspective, year 1, they want to get him on the field. And if they want to get him on the field in year 1, that's probably going to have to be either at slot or big nickel or safety. And then ultimately, when Darius Slay moves on, hopefully your starting corners are Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. And I think he can handle that. All right, let's get him on the field at a different position, then go back to corner. I think that's the plan from the Eagles, the long-term plan. But you're right. We'll see how that shakes out. You mentioned Brandon. We were talking about edge rushers. I was thinking about this, Bill, and I want to run this by you. I think everybody's of the mentality, this is year 15 for Brandon Graham. This is it, the farewell tour, Mr. Eagle. Nobody's played more games as an Eagle. By the way, you should do that on 97.5, the Fanatic, when you're on there, Bill. I don't want to program your show, but I think this might be the most underrated Philly athlete of all time.
Who, BG?
BG. I was looking at his PFF grades since when he took off in 2012. Here's the numbers. I'm going to do this quickly. Number 2, number 19, number 6, number 10, number 2, number 5, number 7, number 15, number 10. He was injured in 2021. Number 5 coming back off the injury, and then very limited play time last year, number 15. That's it amongst all edge rushers in the NFL over his career.
Not too bad.
Yeah. He for some reason, because he doesn't have big sack numbers, people have not recognized, a lot of people, some have, Eagles certainly have, recognized how good he's been. Now, I bring up this is it for this reason. I think everybody assumes at this stage, don't get me wrong, he can't play 800 snaps, but I think everybody assumes, well, it's got to go incrementally down. Since this is it, why can't it go up?
Right.
And Brandon's going to give you everything, and you don't have to worry about next year or 2 years down the road. So maybe he plays a little bit more, and that helps you on the edge when it talks to some of that depth behind Bryce Huff and Josh Sweat.
It's possible. And all season, I used to talk to Seth Joyner when we would do our game day shows. Seth seemed to think that BG could continue to play for a couple of seasons if they used more of the NASCAR package and moved him inside to D tackle. Seth said, look, he could play D tackle, especially on pass downs. So he thinks he may get more snaps at that position. You could be right, but the history tells us as these guys get older, can he really go? I mean, he played 395 snaps last year. I'm expecting about the same if we're lucky. If he gives us close to 400 snaps, I'll take that, John. I think that would be fine when you still have Nolan Smith, Bryce Huff, Josh Sweat, maybe Zach Bond if he plays that Van Ginkel role that we think he's going to play. Who else do they have on the edge now besides those guys?
Those are your top 4, and then you go down to the Patrick Johnsons of the world, of Teron Jacksons.
Maybe Jalix Hunt gets some burn this year. I'm not expecting.
Jalix Hunt is obviously, but the Eagles have acknowledged he's a developmental prospect, and he's going to essentially redshirt. He's going to be on the roster, obviously, but
what about,
and you also have that future. The Eagles like Julian Okwara.
That's what I was going to ask you about.
Yeah. Now, I don't know at this stage how he makes the team. It could be an injury. It's going to be great because you have to carry Hunt. So you have to carry 6 edge rushers if you want to get Okwara on the team, on the 53. That might be difficult to do, but he's one injury away. We know how this, the attrition. So if somehow you can start him on the practice squad, maybe he gets elevated. They also signed Terrell Lewis. Howie's talked about those futures guys a lot because their strategy was the draft was going to be not very deep on day 3, and undrafted free agency was going to take a hit. So they made a real effort to study the practice squads of other teams and say, all right, can we pluck anybody from there? And they sort of serve as our big-time undrafted free agents. And Terrell Lewis is another guy. He was a 3rd-round pick the same year out of Alabama, Zander school, the same year that Julian was a 3rd-round pick. So they have some guys with some athleticism, but it's hard to count on a futures contract guy. I get that. But there's some depth, at least from a standpoint of guys with some upside.
Yeah, the position I think that they still would probably add some veteran depth to is the D tackle room. As excited as I am to see Jalen Carter, Milton Williams, Jordan Davis all taking that leap, because Milton Williams' contract year, and I've liked what I've seen from Milton Williams.
He's been good, Milton Williams.
But I'm surprised the Eagles didn't get him done. I'm surprised by that.
I was predicting he would have been the deal before Devonte, because I thought at least Devonte Smith, yes, you want to get it done sooner rather than later because the wide receiver market's going to explode. But you had him at least under control for the next 2 years. Milton Williams, this is the true last year of his deal. And if he has a good season, he's going to get paid.
Well, and that's why I'm concerned, because that kind of tells me the Eagles, because I think we all, and I'm a Milton guy, unabashed Milton guy. I think he's a good player. I think he's underrated. But the fact they didn't extend him concerns me, because that's the kind of guy they go after and say, all right, this guy's ready to break out, and we're going to get him at a discount. Now, it could be from his standpoint. He might realize it and say, I'm going to bet on myself. Screw that. I'm not going to take the team discount. So you never know which side it's coming from. But the Eagles' history tells us they try to identify players like that and get them done early. So I'm a little concerned on what that says about their internal thought process about Milton Williams.
I wonder if the two guys in front of him complicate it. I mean, I know they're a little bit far away, but they're probably got big contract coming for Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. Still a little bit of ways away from that, but are they going to pay a third DT that?
Well, you could have had that you get the discount. Like, you're right.
Right. Yeah.
As Bill said, this is his true free agent. If he plays well, he's going to get big money, and you won't be able to pay him because you have to pay Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis down the road, most likely.
Yeah, and I like Milton Williams. I'm with you on that. But I still think even with all those guys, you look at the depth at D tackle, I wouldn't be shocked if they bring in a veteran before training camp to add to that room. Maybe a Calais Campbell. He's still available. He may not be a bad piece to add into that room.
Boy, Calais he's been a good player for a long time.
I would love a guy like that. It reminds me of the Ndamukong Suh role, where they come in, they're a good depth piece. They take a couple snaps. They take a little bit of the pressure off the starting guys, and they still have something left. I thought that was a good fit, and Calais Campbell kind of reminds me of that type of move if they were to bring a guy like that in.
They have some depth. I mean, Marlon Tupelotu, he didn't play much, but when he got in, he made a couple of plays.
I'd rather have Calais Campbell than Marlon Tupelotu.
Same. And then you have Moro Ajomo, another year of him. But I still think maybe adding some depth there. And we know Howie Roseman's not done. I've talked about this before. You look at some of Howie's best moves, they've come in August, man. I mean, he goes out. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson a couple years ago, that was an August move. James Bradbury, he signed in June, which I know now people aren't happy, but he was great in 2022.
Yeah, he was. He was great.
Ronald Darby that year, they got him late. So Howie finds some pieces late. So
the year before Bradbury, sorry to cut you off, Bill. The year before Bradbury, Steven Nelson. I still remember doing the August hit with Johnny Mack right when they signed Steven Nelson, right before
2 days before training camp, and he took the first rep at it. We talked all off season about what are they going to do at cornerback 2? Is Zach McPherson going to be a starter as a 4th round pick? And bang, 2 days before training camp, took the first rep at corner and never left the field.
Yep.
He was a guy who didn't get enough credit here. Good player, not a great player, obviously, but kind of saved him from that standpoint. With Calais, he's 37, but boy, he can still play.
And you're not going to be asking a lot of him.
37, that's old.
Yeah. And he's
chill.
been
It's not that old, Zander.
Yeah. Well, old in NFL terms, obviously. Very young for me.
Yeah, young for us, John.
Yeah, I mean, is he? Man, that's a player that can help you, and that's a guy who probably doesn't want to pay for the veteran minimum, no question. So, do you really want to go into that $5 million range with incentives? Plus, you're taking away reps from younger players. I don't know. That's an interesting conversation. But Calais Campbell and Brandon Graham on the same defensive line, that's some experience right there.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
They just have to replace, and this is a good thing because the defense was so bad last year, but I went and looked at all of the pieces that aren't going to be here that played significant snaps last year. They got to find like 6,000 snaps when you add up all of the pieces.
Even Fletcher Cox, Bill.
Fletcher Cox played close to 700 snaps last year. Now, Zach Cunningham's a name. Maybe they still sign him. I know he's out there. Howie made a point to talk about him at his end-of-year press conference, but he played over 700 snaps. Kevin Byard over 700 snaps. Nick Morrow over 800. Hassan Reddick, 860. James Bradbury over 1,000 snaps last year. So I know that's good because those guys didn't all play well, but a lot of change from last season.
Yeah. You're counting on a lot of guys. Real quick, Bill, as we're on the defense, now we're talking about defensive backs. The one lock on defense on the whole roster is Darius Slay. Cornerback 1, Darius Slay. Any concern he takes a step back this year? He's getting old. And I remember a couple games last year, fans were all over him for, remember
See, on social media, somebody was in the Eagles locker room giving the finger to Slay's line. Come on.
That was dumb. But talking about the player and the play on the field, any concern that, hey, our best player our best cornerback might also take a step back? Now, I know you got those guys in the wings, but they're rookies. Any concern about that?
I think you have to be concerned. He's going to be 33 when the season starts. Yeah. And look, you talked about Brandon Graham being an underrated athlete in Philly. I think Darius Slay is a little bit underrated at times. I think he's a very good corner in this league, but gets a bad rep because I think of the fact that he doesn't stop talking and making excuses sometimes after games, which rubs fans the wrong way. But you have to be concerned. We saw it last year with James Bradbury, where in 2022, the guy was an all-pro, and then last season, he looked like he shouldn't even be on the practice squad. So it happens quick in the NFL, and especially at the cornerback position. You lose a half a step, that's a major difference in this league. So I'm hopeful Darius Slay, he's a smart enough player that even if he regresses a little bit, that he could still be effective. But, yeah, that's definitely got to be a concern. And if these young guys aren't ready to step in, if Keely Ringo's not ready, Quinyon Mitchell's not ready, and Slay takes a step back, we're in a little bit of trouble. Now, what I'm hoping happens is if the Eagles can get back to getting that pressure on the quarterback, because you saw in 22 what helped the secondary so much is you had 70 sacks. You led the NFL in sacks, and then it's no coincidence that you're also the number one pass defense. And then last year, your 70 sacks drops to 43, and you go from number one pass defense to 31st pass defense. So if they can generate more pressure with their front four, I think that could have that ripple effect throughout the defense. But, I'm a little concerned. Let me ask you this, John, because I want to hear your opinion. I had some people ask me, any chance Darius Slay gets traded if Quinyon Mitchell and Keely Ringo show, hey, we're ready to take over the outside cornerback position? Is there any scenario where they would trade Slay? I'll give you my answer real quick. I don't think they would, simply because what was the first thing Howie Roseman said to Quinyon Mitchell? Hey, I want you following Darius Slay.
Living with Slay,
I think they appreciate his veteran presence back there. But what do you think? Any scenario where they would move on?
I think people need to pump the brakes on the expectations with the young corners. I mean, it's great to have young guys with upside, but it's a process. Especially, I talked about the complicated nature of Vic's defense. I mean, and that's a good pull by you bringing up Howie saying, he wants basically Quinyon Mitchell and Darius Slay's back pocket, teach him how to be a professional. Because for all the talk about Darius, tremendous teammate, team captain, goes about it the right way when it comes to preparation, practice, things like that. He's got a very big personality, but he is a professional. He's not a 6-time Pro Bowl cornerback because he just rolls the footballs out on the field. He works really hard, and you want him around to teach those guys how to be a professional, number one. But man, the Keely Ringo and Quinyon Mitchell as day one starters, that could potentially happen from an injury standpoint, and you don't want to see it happen. You might, there's some good to when you throw somebody in the deep end of the pool, and if they're mentally tough enough, maybe it helps them long term. But you're going to have some ugly moments if you have young guys like that on the field, especially in this defense. So, I think people need to be a little more patient. That was
another thing that Howie Roseman said at his end of the season press conference, talking about how they want to play some of the younger guys more. Now, not necessarily rookies, but he even mentioned
that was great, by the way. Yeah, he said it, and Nick came up 10 minutes later and said, "I'm trying to win a game."
Yeah, they were kind of going back and forth because Howie was like, the coaches may look at the depth chart and be concerned because this guy hasn't done it, but we picked him for a reason. So, look, I think there's a balance. I don't like the fact that last year Nolan Smith didn't really play a lot to start the season, and then you're relying on him in a playoff game. Sidney Brown, they didn't really play him a lot in the beginning of the season, where I would rather see these guys, if we're going to be relying on them in November and December and hopefully January, let's get them involved early. Let's get them on the field a little bit earlier. If your plan is to get them involved later, I think there's no substitute for experience.
Yeah, it's one of those things too. Going back to Slay and even the pass rush, it's like what came first, the chicken or the egg? Because Gary Cobb brought this up yesterday. Great point about Bryce Huff. He's also playing with a great defense. You got Sauce Gardner behind him, DJ Reed. I mean, they have a great defensive line, and also factor in they maybe had a little bit of throwaway games last year. They only won 7 ball games. How many of those sacks that Bryce Huff got,
killed the Eagles? That wasn't a throwaway.
No,
he destroyed the Eagles in that game.
Now,
I think overall, I think it's a fair point.
The good thing I see with Bryce Huff, though, is that as good as the Jets defense was, they're another one of these defensive philosophies where they don't blitz a lot. I think they were 31st in the NFL in blitz rate. So he's used to a defense where you're trying to get there just with your front four, not bringing all types of pressure from other spots. So I think that'll help him, because we know Fangio doesn't blitz a ton either. He was 27th in blitz rate last year. But, yeah, I mean, look, we look at the defense and we need a lot of question marks to turn into exclamation points for this defense to be really good. And you look at every single time the Eagles have been to the NFC Championship game, they've had a top 8 defense in terms of points against. So I know we're all excited about the offense. They've never been to an NFC Championship game without a top 8 defense. So we need that defense to live up to all of the expectations that people have for these young guys.
Top 8 is lofty, though, Bill.
Yeah. It is, especially coming up last season. At Bill Colarulo, make sure you follow Bill on X. When are you on today? Do we know?
Yo, how about it? I get a day off. I feel like I'm working like a dog over there. I've been on like 6 days straight, but today I got a day off, so you could see I got the golf shirt on.
All right,
golfing
got
for
a
the first
day
time
off.
in a
I was told you had to bail by 8:40, so
that's because I take my daughter to school.
Take your daughter to school.
Yeah, so I take her to school, and then I got a tea time later on today. I can't wait, man. My game's been in the crapper, though.
That is a good dad day right there. Dropping the kid off and then going golfing. That's dad.
Well, I'm getting married June 1st too. So
that's coming up, Bill.
Yeah, so I'll be here next Tuesday, but then I won't see it because I'll be on my honeymoon the week.
Where are you going?
Going to Aruba.
Nice.
Ooh, nice.
Never been there before. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking more forward to the honeymoon than the wedding, but don't tell anybody.
Yeah, I believe it.
Well, congratulations. I did not know. So congratulations on that. Aruba. You got it all, Bill Colorado. You're going golfing today. You're living the life, my friend.
Well, golf will be fun, but the highlight of my day is talking to you two.
Bill, what are you shooting today? You breaking 80? Breaking 90? Where you at?
Bro, if I can get under 100 today, I'll be happy. It's been a while. Now, I was kidding because I said to my fiance before she left today, I said, I'm shooting low 80s today. She's like, you shoot low 80s, you can get anything you want because there's no way you're shooting low 80s today. I haven't been out. Last year, I was golfing. When I was doing the power hour, I would leave and then go golf almost every day. But now I'm on the radio so much, it's been hard to make time to get to the course, man.
Well, just don't get arrested on your way to the course like Scotty. That's
Scheffler. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
If that was we had this debate.
You're a lawyer. You can get yourself out of it. Yeah.
We had this debate on the Fanatic. What if that would have been a football player the morning of the Super Bowl? They playing in the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
Depends who they are. If
Scotty Golf,
quarterback, I mean, he's the #1 golfer in the world. So if that's Patrick Mahomes, he's playing in the Super Bowl.
No matter what, probably.
Yeah.
So, well, gentlemen, appreciate you having me. Always good seeing you. Hopefully, I'll see you next week.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. There's Bill Colarulo joining the show from 97.5 The Fanatic. Doing great work for them, by the way. We miss Bill's contributions to JAKIB Sports on his Philly Sports Power, but it's great to get him here.
I didn't know he was getting married.
Yeah, I knew he was. I knew it was lingering in the wings. I wasn't sure when it was, but June 1st, that's right around the corner.
Yeah, man, that's coming up. Wow. Yeah. Oof.
Week and a half.
May 21st. I had to look. Yeah, he's right
I am
down.
not a married man yet, but Johnny Mac, you are a married man. Any advice for Bill Colarulo?
Keep your head down and just be agreeable. Compromise.
Agreeable.
Boom, boom, boom. Yeah.
I like about it. I like it. Happy wife, happy life. I guess that's what they say. I don't know. I don't have any experience in it, but that's
Definitely. You don't want to get down in the weeds. It's very difficult. I always used to tell Jody, man, don't accept. I was a good debater in college, and the first thing they taught you is don't accept a faulty premise. In other words, you don't agree with somebody's premise, don't argue it. Why are you arguing it? It's really difficult to do that, especially when you're married. So yeah, keep your head down and move along. That's my best advice.
There you go. There's marriage advice from Johnny Mac. I don't know if you guys thought you were getting that on Tuesday's edition of Birds 365. There's a good one too. Lower the toilet seat. My girlfriend gives me crap. All the time. So good stuff there. Thanks everybody for joining in today. We got no more guests in hour number 2. So Johnny Mac and I are going to get a little bit deep into the roster, OTA thoughts. I mean, I'm going to pick Johnny Mac's brain on the Bryce Huff stuff. We briefly touched on it yesterday, but the more I think about it, the more I'm wondering if that's something that we should be banking on going into the season. Now we're going to bank on it, but we'll see if it works out for him. We'll kick around that. And Sirianni, I have a question on Sirianni. Joe Santoliquito, our friend, wrote a great piece on Bleeding Green Nation about Sirianni getting the mojo back. I think that's a very important part of the 2024 Eagles season. So we'll talk about all that and more coming up next on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood days.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Del Val Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles. EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to Tuesday's edition of Birds 365. I want to thank everybody for tuning in this morning. If you missed the start of the show, a couple Eagles news, couple Eagles tidbits that broke yesterday. Devonte Parker officially retires, so he will not be with the Eagles. He joins the likes of Marquise Goodwin and Frank Gore, people who signed with the Eagles and ultimately never, ever put on the jersey. But Devonte Parker hangs it up. And then one other thing Johnny Mac and I didn't touch on. Cooper DeJean signs the rookie contract, so good stuff. Only one rookie remaining, and that's our first-round pick, Quinyon Mitchell.
Oh, my God. Quinyon's not signed yet. Oh, my God.
I'm not going there, Johnny Mac. Yeah. So, but, yeah, everybody likes to make a big deal about that. Now, that'll get done soon. So, only Quinyon left to sign, which is pretty good stuff. Johnny Mac, you got the full – also for those that missed it, Johnny Mac will have full access tomorrow instead of a brief 10, 15-minute period where they can watch the practice. Full access to the full OTA tomorrow. What can you expect to see now that you know it's full? Are you going to be able to see like any type of scheme things they might be installing? I know everybody's looking at the position battles, but with a full practice, you'll probably be able to see some good stuff, no?
Well, full practice, I mean, it's probably going to be an hour, maybe hour, a little bit over an hour. Who knows? They've changed a little bit, obviously, but it's not going to be like 2 hours or anything of that nature. So you could see some 9-on-7, some stuff. It's always, when you're out there in shirts and shorts, it's always easier to get a look at the receivers and the corners, defensive backs, linebackers are going to be interesting from what we said. Where's Zach Bond going to line up? Where's Isaiah Rodgers going to line up?
Right.
Those are the most important things. Interested to see how much Vic throws at him after saying he wants to throw a lot at them early and whittle it down from there. And then Kellen Moore, I mean, he's not going to break out the kitchen sink, but do you see Jalen Hurts under center more? Is there more motion? There's going to be more motion. It's just a matter of how much. How do they start employing Saquon Barkley? Because there's so much talk about that. Is it going to be same as Miles Sanders and DeAndre Swift, or is it going to be different? All of that kind of stuff, and you just get to see the opening of it. So
I'm curious to see that on Saquon too. I think he's going to be that bell cow. Maybe he'll be a bell cow back type of guy this year. 3-down back, obviously can block out of the backfield. I don't think Jeffrey Lurie wants them to become a running team, but they might become more of a running team because I think it could open up things in the passing game. Is that fair to assume?
No. I mean, I got one of those things that, hey, Deuce Stallion, from a fan, and Westbrook and blah blah, even that's not that long ago, but the game has changed so drastically. And you mentioned Jeffrey Lurie, and Jeffrey's right. I'll tell you when Jeffrey's wrong, and I've told you Jeffrey's wrong, and he's right. To be a consistent winner in the modern NFL, you have to have a high octane passing offense. Period. End of sentence. The difference between the game now and the game then, you throw the ball to win the game, you run it to close the game. And that's just, if you're not doing that, and then people will bring up the outliers, the occasional outliers. Derrick Henry at a stage, Adrian Peterson at his height. And no one's saying you can't win that way, but you're willfully decreasing your margin of error is how I always describe it. You can win that way, but you have to win you have to get the lead. You have to play from the lead. Yeah. All of a sudden, if you're a heavy running team and you're down 10 points, what are you going to do? You're going to be awfully patient and try to get back in that game, which is a possibility, but the margin of error gets smaller and smaller and smaller. You go back to the greatest show on turf, Rams, were the most interesting team to me at the time because no one had ever done it before. They didn't give a rat's ass about turning the football over because they're like, we're going to get it back and we're going to score and we're going to score quickly. And they did, and they won a Super Bowl that way.
Yeah.
When you can, and you see it all the time, your team's giving up. You never used to see an NFL team give up a 17, 20-point lead. You see it all the time now because you have all these explosive offenses. And even that, you're never safe because you have this greater margin of error when you have a high-octane passing offense. To go about it the other way in this era, sometimes you have to.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson, I would say, are the two best dual threat style quarterbacks in the NFL. Both of those teams signed big name running backs this offseason. The Ravens picked up Derrick Henry. Eagles signed Saquon Barkley. I'm not saying that means anything, but I will say I do wonder if the teams understand that they're not going to be as high-powered of a passing offense because they don't have the quarterback. I'm not saying they can't be high-powered passers, but they're not Patrick Mahomes. They're not Justin Herbert. They're not Josh Allen's. That, you know, they're not that style of quarterback. So maybe they're more playing into that style and want to be more versatile in offense to open things up.
I don't know. Yeah, and I also go, look what they just paid A.J. Brown. Look what they just paid Devonte Smith.
Yeah, big money.
Now, you are. I mean, come on. At some point, it's got to become common sense to people. You're going to do that and say, oh, we're going to build the offense on Saquon Barkley because we got to run the football. I mean, come on. I mean, again, when I talk about contracts, I talk about contracts all the time because they tell you something. Devonte Parker, when I signed, you're not a guarantee to make this team. He's retired. It's not magic. They signed a $1.21 million deal. Saquon makes a lot of money for a running back. That's a pittance compared to what they invested in A.J. Brown and Devonte Smith. Why would you do that? If you think he's the key to it all, right, why would you do that? People, I mean, common sense is a thing, and people need to exercise it.
No, I agree. I agree. I mean, they're paying almost $50+ million. Obviously, their cap hits aren't that, but close to $50+ million for their two receivers, and they're paying 12 for Saquon Barkley. So I certainly get what you're saying from that perspective, but I do wonder if the Eagles, boy, they love this high-powered passing offense. They love Kellen Moore. They love, you know,
and that's another thing. That's Kellen Moore's history.
Like, are they trying to fit a square peg into a round hole? Jalen Hurts isn't that high, you know, high rep passing quarterback. And I like Jalen Hurts a lot. I have no problem with his style of play, but to sit here and say that he's a Joe Burrow or a Mahomes from the standpoint that they sit in the pocket and dissect the defense all day, that's not what he does.
Yes and no. I mean, his numbers, his raw numbers, they tend to score in a different way because once they get in the red zone, I mean, he's had 27, 28 rushing touchdowns over the past 2 seasons, whatever the number is. I know during his MVP level season where he came in second, you know, he was pretty good passing the ball, but you still had those people complaining because he didn't have a lot of passing touchdowns. Well, you know, if you're getting the ball in there running it once you're down in the red zone, who cares? Touchdown's a touchdown. But, you know, he was up 3,800 yards, whatever it was, passing. Passer rating over 100. Is he Patrick Mahomes? No, but is anybody Patrick Mahomes?
No.
Is he a high volume thrower like I always bring up Kirk Cousins because of his consistency? No,
he's not.
But he's better. You know, he just
better
goes
in the
about
right
it.
system. That's my concern with Kellen Moore. Like Kirk Cousins is throwing for 5,000 yards a year. He's not Kirk Cousins, but I don't want him to be Kirk Cousins because, like you said, I think Jalen Hurts is a better quarterback than Kirk Cousins. But I also think you have to play to Jalen Hurts' strengths, and to throw the ball all over the yard, which is what Kellen Moore really likes to do, isn't really the best way to get the most out of him. Would you agree with that or no?
No. There's,
So you think throwing the ball all over the yard though is a good, you're going to get maximum value out of your quarterback Jalen Hurts by doing that?
There's a balance to it. I don't want him being Kirk Cousins. And it's nice that he has a good running back, and the same thing as you brought up Lamar and Baltimore, but he's got to throw the ball 500 times. Again, if you're not, you're making life difficult for yourself. You just are.
Yeah. There's also a situational aspect to it too. I mean, he threw for a ton of yards in the Super Bowl. They still lost the game, but yeah.
If you're up 14-0 and you want to scale it back early and start running the football more, have at it. Go do it. Do whatever you want at that point. Although you're probably leaving the door open. More, but you got a 2-touchdown lead late. You gotta throw the ball to get a lead. You got to run the ball to close it out. That's what the Eagles want to do. And that's what they built this team to do on paper. And we'll see if they're able to accomplish it. But yeah, the run the ball crowd, you got to stop it. It's 2024. All right. It's not 1975. It's not happening, number one, because you have the luxury of watching a team that's not dumb, and you should enjoy that. The fact that the Eagles are, basically ahead of the curve 9 times out of 10, and you get to follow a team that makes these right decisions normally, and most teams don't. And yet you have this archaic thinking. It drives the players insane. It drives the organization insane.
And Jeffrey Lurie won't let it happen. He'll be in.
The guy who owns the team, luckily, you should be thankful for that, will not let it happen. The signals are there. You can keep banging your head against the wall, and you would hate this team if they built it on Saquon Barkley. You would hate this team.
Yeah, I agree. Everybody would. But yeah. I mean, look, we do have Jalen Hurts. That's where I struggle with it, because I agree with what you're saying that you need to have a high-powered passing offense. I think Regal in the chat's making good points about Kellen Moore is going to adapt to the kind of players he has. But I just wonder if situationally they need to play to Jalen's strengths, get back to 2022, let him run a little bit, let him do what he needs to do to open up the field instead of relying so much on the passing game. But I think you're right. I think they paid $55 million to wide receivers. They're going to pass the ball a lot.
Well, and also they're best players too on offense. You can argue that I've said for a while, AJ Brown's the best pure football player on the Eagles. And then you can talk about who's number 2 but Devonte's really good. Yeah, I don't get it, but it's never going to end in this town. And I don't see anybody else. Hey, don't get your ball to your best players. Or you got to get some role player involved, because you got it for the sake of getting a role player involved. Look, if the other team goes in, and Bill Belichick was famous for this for many years, look, I'm not going to let A.J. Brown beat me. And right. He takes him away. Then you got to go in a different direction. And that's, the coaching staff has got to be smart enough to toggle and take advantage of that type of situation. And Shane Steichen would say this all the time, if they're not taking something away, just do it and do it and do it and do it and do it. And by the way, if that means running the football in a certain circumstance, like week 2 against Minnesota and Brian Flores last year, who showed up with 6-man boxes and didn't come out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Run it. Go ahead. for 1 week. For 1 week, go do it. And everybody was so excited. How good was DeAndre Swift? Well, guess what? If he's playing an 8-man front and they're trying to stop DeAndre Swift, pretty easy to stop DeAndre Swift. If you got a weird defensive coordinator who's not playing to stop the run, and Brian Flores is as weird as it gets and as hinky as it gets, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, and he wouldn't come out of it. And to the Eagles' credit, they took advantage of it and they won a game emphatically. But what happened from that, Zander? Oh, they should be able to run the ball. You're not playing that. They didn't play that front again for the rest of the season. So I think that's the part of it that people don't enter in the equation. That becomes, oh, we ran the football there. We were so effective running the football. You know, it's and the minute you have success, because they had success the next week as well in Tampa Bay, which is pretty good run defense, and that's impressive. Typically. And then after that, teams adjusted and they said, all right, well, they're running the football a little bit too effectively. So you put an extra guy in the box, blah, blah, blah. Everything constantly changes in the NFL, but the Eagles' best players are indicative of a passing game, and that's by choice, and that's the correct choice.
I agree with that. Let's go to our friend James Carver in the chat, super chat. Johnny, love you, but common sense also must account for our defensive talent and not gas our D, especially first team with constant throws and fast series, or you may never have chance to scale back later. Johnny Mack will give you a chance to respond to James, who's always great in the chat.
Well, it ain't Chip Kelly. Yeah, I'd agree with you if it's Chip Kelly. I mean, this offense, I mean, two things, convert on third down. And by the way, the Eagles were the third ranked offense in the NFL on third downs, for people that don't know. They were better on third downs last year than they were the year prior. So, that's pretty good. On the other end, the defense was 31st. The defense can get off the field, and the defense gets gas because they can't get off the field.
Right.
So it's not the offense's responsibility. The offense is third. The defense is 31st. You're going to blame the offense for that?
Yeah, no. Can't blame the offense for that, Johnny Mac.
I mean, could it have been better at times? Everything could have been better late. I mean, everything turned on its head late, offensively and defensively. We can all agree with that. But defensively, look, this team stunk. As Bill pointed out, I don't even know how you do this. I still wonder how you could be the number one pass defense in the NFL and be 31st the very next year. I don't even know how that's possible. Barring a complete rebooting of the defense. And obviously people didn't like Jonathan Gannon, the defensive coordinator, Sean Desai. Blame whoever you want. But they were number one, and then they were number 31. And they're 31st in third down defense as well. I mean, I guess they could have been second on third down offense or first in third down offense, but they were pretty good overall. So, yeah, that to me is with Chip Kelly. Yeah, I mean, Chip was silly. He didn't have a filter. It was always go, 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 and you got to be better situationally. And that's what Bill Belichick did. He loved Chip Kelly, and he always tried to pick his brain when it came to using tempo. But he was smart enough, and he had a quarterback smart enough to know when to press the gas pedal and ease up on the gas pedal. That's not what Nick Sirianni did, and that's not what Kellen Moore's going to do. So that part of it is going to take care of itself with this offense. And if they're not top 5 in third down offense, the expectations ought to be they should be. I will say that.
John, do you like the hire of Kellen Moore? Do you think he's going to be able to do, and I'm talking about your opinion, I'm not talking about reporting or sources. I'm talking about Johnny Mac's opinion on the hiring of Kellen Moore, specifically for the talent on this football team.
No, I don't like the hire, but it has nothing to do with Kellen Moore. I've been pretty consistent on this. I don't like the way they're handling this. Basically, they dropped in Kellen Moore and Doug Musmeyer to an offensive coaching staff that was already here. I don't like that. So it has nothing to do with Kellen Moore. He's proven to be an effective offensive coordinator. Again, he's going to be an 11 personnel guy. He's going to be a heavy passing guy. But that's what the modern NFL is. And I have no problem with his philosophies or his resume or anything of that nature. I just don't like the situation they dropped him into. I don't think that's not how you generate success typically. You look at Vic. Vic was allowed to bring in a bunch of guys. Now, some he knew, like Clint Hurt, and some he didn't know, like Bobby King. But for the most part, it's an entirely new staff, except for Jeremiah Washburn, who's the edge guy. And then some lower level coaches. They kept Rennell Williams, Tyler Scudder, who's very close to Nick Sirianni, started out as his personal assistant. But those are not meaningful. Clint Hurt, the senior defensive assistant, defensive line coach, inside linebackers, Bobby King, he's new. Christian Parker's got a history with Vic, is the passing game coordinator, secondary coach. Roy Anderson, the cornerbacks coach. Joe Casper, safeties coach, who was here, but he was down with Vic in Miami. That's the defensive coach. The offensive coaching staff, it's Kevin Patullo still here, Jamal Singleton still here, Aaron Moorhead still here, Jason Michaels still here, obviously Stout, TJ Paganetti still here. He got Doug Nussmeier, and he also got Kyle Valero, who's a low-level assistant. That's it. So that's why I don't like the hire. If you want Kellen Moore, and the reason Cliff Kingsbury isn't here is because he wanted his staff. He wanted his guys around him. Kellen Moore was more acceptable of having Knicks guys around him. I don't think that's the way I would have done it. Not saying it can't succeed. I just don't like that way. If you want to hire somebody to be the offensive coordinator, let him be the offensive coordinator. And that includes letting him have his assistants.
So are you saying Moore should have been able to bring all of his own guys in? Would that have been preferred?
That would have been, if you want to keep these guys, if you want to keep, and I just went down the list of names.
Yeah.
And obviously Stout's staying. We all know that. Kevin Patullo's Nick's right-hand man. Jamal's the assistant head coach. Aaron Moorhead, wide receivers, Jason Michael, tight end, even TJ Paganetti, who's the assistant offensive line coach now. If you want to keep all those guys, why are you bringing in a new offensive coordinator? That's my question to Jeffrey Lurie. And Jeffrey would say, well, it was Nick's idea. And that's where you get into semantics. And yeah, it was Nick's idea because Nick didn't want to get fired. So, he can read a room, Nick Sirianni. And that was a political move. He understood, no, if we're going to keep Brian Johnson, that wasn't going to be acceptable to Jeffrey Lurie. So instead, you half-assed it. Said, all right, you can keep all your guys, but we got to scapegoat Nick Sirianni. Yeah. We got to scapegoat Brian Johnson and Alex Tanney. And then we'll bring in two guys from outside here and just pluck them in. Does that make sense to people?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And I see exactly what you're saying. But why would Kellen Moore want to do that? Or Two, I'll ask you, do you think that's a power struggle that has been addressed by the higher power in the room, Jeffrey Lurie? And what I mean by that is, Nick,
I don't
I'll
think
keep you around, but Kellen Moore is going to have autonomy in the offense. But then you do bring up the question, well, then he would have brought in all of his own guys.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a power struggle between Kellen Moore and Nick Sirianni.
I think there might be one. I mean,
well, maybe if there's struggle early and there's some struggles, maybe it becomes one. I don't think there's one right now. If you're asking me why did Kellen Moore take the job, just from what I talked about, Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, Devonte Smith, Dallas Goedert, top 5 offensive line. In his mind, he can go have a good offensive season and go get a head coaching job, hopefully. Yeah. I'm sure that's his game plan. And I'll take Doug with him. Doug Nussmeier will take him with him. So that's why he would do it. And I don't blame him for doing it. But if he had his druthers, I think he would want to bring in, and that's not to say, again, with Stout, nobody's going to have an issue about keeping him. Obviously, I said, when this started, and a lot of people use the word neutered when it came to Nick Sirianni. And I said on the show, watch Kevin Patullo's name. If he's here, Nick's still got some power. If he's not
that's why
here,
I asked why Kellen took it, because if Nick still has power over the offense, isn't it? I don't want to say it's a lose-lose. I know you're getting great talent, but Kellen's an offensive guy. He's not going to be able to call what he wants with complete autonomy.
I think he is. I think that was one of the things that Nick sold to Jeffrey Lurie after the season. So I think it's going to start out with autonomy. The question is, as you kind of brought up, if things start going sideways, how long does that last? And, Nick has this resume where he can go back and say, well, we had the number 3 offense. We had the number 8 offense. We were number 1 in 4th down offense, number 3 in 3rd down offense. And we're not doing that now. So let's go back to what we were doing. I could see that developing in season. But as long as they're successful, I think everything will be fine. And there's no reason they shouldn't be successful because of the talent they have on the offensive side of the football.
So if the Eagles offense explodes this year and they're back to form and they're tremendous, this is where I hate the CEO type coach in the modern NFL, because are we just back to the same boat we were before this season? If Kellen Moore dominates the offense, you don't even know who to give credit to, but let's assume Kellen gets it and he gets a head coaching job. Now I'm back to the drawing board.
No, I think people should be rooting for that.
Obviously, if you're an Eagle fan, because that means they're going to win a lot of football games, but there's not going to be any stability.
That's like one of those things where, of all the million cliches you hear around the NFL, the one that always sticks with me, and it's a simple one, and but it's also true: control what you can control. Can't do anything else. You can't control what you can't control. So it's a waste of energy and time to spend any kind of, whether it's angst or anything, on it. You just do your best in what you can control and move on. And it's BLG, our buddy Brandon Lee Gouton, who has the best thought process in that, from my perspective, is if you're good, you're going to lose coaches. Don't worry about it. You got to replay it. That's the nature of it. But why are you going to hem and haw?
Which is why I don't like that Jalen Hurts complained. I don't want to say he complained about it, but he kind of did. I mean, in the end of the season, he's like, it reminds me of college. There's a coaching carousel. I have a new coordinator. Well, that's the style that Jeffrey Lurie has chosen. If you
Well,
have a CEO head coach,
I think when he said
if you have a CEO head coach, John, and your offense is highly successful, the chance of you having a coaching carousel is drastically higher than if you have Andy Reid or you have Kyle Shanahan, right?
yeah, but even when, you know, in the case of Kyle, I would argue, you know, it's kept him from winning Super Bowls. He's had tremendous
Yeah, and it took
success.
Andy a long time. It took Andy a long time. He still has his problems with it.
Yeah. And Andy hands off play call. You don't even know when Andy's calling plays and not calling plays because he hands it off and takes it back quite a bit these days.
Yeah, but it's Andy's offense. There's no question about that.
No.
Is this Sirianni's offense or is it Kellen's? Like, we don't really know. We think it's going to be Kellen's, right?
Well, it was definitely Sirianni's offense when Shane and Brian were running it. In theory, it's supposed to be Kellen Moore's offense now. We'll see. We'll see. It was definitely Sirianni's offense through Shane Steichen and Brian Johnson, to the point that he emphasized that a million times. And at the time,
almost so many times I stopped believing him.
Yeah, no, it was.
No, I know it was. I'm just saying, from like he told us till we were blue in the face that it was,
and that was kind of his, and why I was a little frustrated when people would ask him questions about, you know, the offense and Brian last year, and you know, he would try to protect Brian and say it's my stinking offense. I mean,
yeah, well, I'll tell you where that falls apart is if Shane Steichen, which he's already done a good job in year one, if he's got Anthony Richardson playing at a high level and the Eagles offense struggles again, I mean, how are you gonna even sit here and say that wasn't Shane Steichen?
Come on. The Eagles offense was 8 in the NFL. I just said.
No, I know they were
3 and third down offense.
Down the stretch. They didn't win the games they needed to win when it mattered the most. They were stale. They were predictable. They put up 9 points versus the Bucs in the playoffs.
And that's self-described by Nick Sirianni. So everybody, you know, brings it up, and rightfully so. And I have no problem with it. But part of that is the political nature of having to keep his job. Nick believes in himself. I'm pretty confident in that. Yeah. And it's probably killing him that he had to do that. Would never admit it, but that's my process on that. Take that with a grain of salt. He's probably saying what I'm saying behind the scenes. It's like, what the fuck? Essentially, you know, what, you know, this is a bad offense. What was Shane's Colts last year? I'd have to look it up. I guarantee it ain't 8. And now we're talking about him like he's, and Shane was great, and I love Shane.
Didn't have AJ Brown and Devonte Smith. And
no, but that's part of it. And Nick also says, you know, show me a good coach, I'll show you a bunch of good players. That's definitely part of it. It's the biggest part of it. But the only point I'm trying to get to is this was not a bad offense. So if you're going to judge a bad offense by a stretch of games, that's fine. I get it. It was horrible. It was ugly. Any word you want to use, but it wasn't bad overall. No matter how many times you want to spin it, it wasn't bad overall. And there aren't a lot of if you go through Eagles history, there aren't a lot of better offenses than the one you saw over the past 2 years.
I want to get to our next super chat from James Carver. I appreciate his contributions, but I do want to say one thing. Okay, the offense was good, but the reason that Nick Sirianni got rid of play calling is to be a better CEO head coach. Well, he sucked at that last year.
Well, I mean, yeah, if you want to talk about,
I mean, yeah, the offense was good, but hey, Nick Sirianni, you could, I mean, debate it. Yes, he lost it. No, he didn't lose it. The locker room wasn't playing for him. They went 1-7 down the stretch. They collapsed. They completely collapsed.
You know, Randy was on the show, Randy Mueller, and he, I thought, gave a good explanation, an example of, you know, as a former GM, former executive of the year, he said, basically, if you want to boil it down, head coach's job is to solve problems. If you want to boil it down to the bare minimum, doesn't matter how you solve them, you got to solve them. And he didn't solve them. So
Yeah, he didn't at all.
That to me is a legitimate criticism that he did not solve these problems, and that's why he's on the clock, and that's why he's in the position he's in, and that's why he was forced to fire certain guys he didn't want to fire, whether he admits it or not. He's on the clock, and we all know that, and he's got to. If something like that happens this year, the Eagles could start 10-1 again, and nobody's going to believe it unless they're blaming, unless they're blowing out people by 3 touchdowns every week, which is unlikely in the NFL. Nobody's going to believe it until they finish the deal. So it's going to be an entirety of a 17-game season. It's going to be a long haul. And it's going to be interesting, but I have no problem with people questioning Nick Sirianni's ability for not being able to fix things because he didn't fix things.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the best criticism of him at this point. Like you say, it's not really the offense. I mean, the offense was stale a little bit, whatever, but they were ranked highly. It was the other problems that Nick didn't fix last year. And when you have when you're an offensive coach and you have a guy that's calling plays as the offensive coordinator, that's supposed to be what you're good at. Like, that's the whole reasoning, right? That you're saying, hey, don't be like Andy Reid and Kyle Shanahan, where they're calling the plays for the most part, because you miss out on all the other in-game stuff. You miss out on being a head coach. Well, Nick's, from my perspective, he sucked at it last year.
Well, as far as the game management stuff, I mean, look, people criticize him for his emotions. I mean, by all means, if anybody wants to throw in the chat their issues with various methods of game management, I didn't see an overriding sense of, oh, he's making terrible decisions.
Yeah, no, he didn't. That's true.
So that part of it, I'm not sure. And then the other part, which I think people could recognize, best exemplified by the Seattle game, like, he's protecting his players, which I think if people understood that, maybe they would like him a little bit more. Like, he looked, and AJ used the term fool, I believe. He looked like a fool trying to explain what happened in that Seattle game because he was trying to protect the quarterback, and the wide receiver, and AJ. And AJ admitted that. And, you know, in theory, a fan should like that. But in the moment, they don't know it. And he sounds like a blithering moron. But guess what? That's a good job by Nick Sirianni. And guess what? That's a bad job by the guy nobody wants to blame, who didn't take responsibility for it. And that's Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts skates under a lot of this.
Yeah, not to me. I don't bring it up as much on Birds 365 as probably I would like, but Jalen Hurts in the bullseye for me this year. Like, you got the big contract, you got the big money, you got every playmaker a quarterback could ask for in the modern NFL. You got I think, somebody that could be a good offensive coordinator. The owner's behind you, the GM is behind. I mean, what more do you need as a quarterback in the NFL? It's time to put up or shut up. So I got a high expectation for Jalen Hurts this year. Let me go to James.
Well, you should, but real quick before we get to James, if you know, I talk about the million cliches around the NFL. Coaches and quarterbacks are taught from day one, and all of them understand it. When you have success, it's we. When you don't, it's me. You take the responsibility.
Yep.
Nick did. Jalen didn't.
That's a problem.
It is a problem.
I mean, it's funny you said that today on today's show. I don't know if you heard the Tom Brady clip that was floating around of him. He had the little, I don't know, call it powwow with the Fanatics, Michael Rubin, Jay-Z, and all the rookie quarterbacks. And he's talking about how much players of today are focused on themselves with social media. It's a team game. And he talked about putting the team first. And I will say that's a very fair criticism of Jalen Hurts. I mean,
in that moment it was, And
Absolutely.
he still hasn't taken responsibility. AJ did, not Jalen. AJ did.
Can you chalk it up to Jalen's subdued, laid-back nature? Like, he's not a super outspoken guy. He's more of a stoic guy. Can you chalk it up to that, or do you want to?
Boy, it's really I can't, because it's really easy to say, you know what? I made a poor read. I threw in the double covers. That's on me.
Right.
That's like quarterback 101.
Yeah.
That literally, that's on me. I made a mistake. I tried to push the ball down the field. I got to, I wasn't disciplined enough, whatever, however you want to explain it. It's easy. It's easy to explain it. And you take it off AJ, you take it off the head coach, bang, simple. You can do it right after the game. He knows what happened. Didn't. Still to this day hasn't.
See, I'm really curious to know. And I agree, boy, that's troublesome. But I do wonder, Jalen Hurts, he comes from that Saban school of like, don't give anything to the media. Do you think he took accountability to the guys that matter in the locker room?
We found that from some of the Alabama guys. Nick Saban has an actual class for Alabama guys to deal with the media.
Yeah, I'm sure he does.
That could be part of it. But again, not pointing to you, Zander, but people want to make excuses for the players.
Right.
And that's fine. I know it's coming. I have no problem with it. But you should realize you're making excuses for the player, which is, again, if it's your favorite team, I get it, but it is what it is. It's an excuse. He should have took responsibility. He knows it. Quarterbacks know it. Quarterbacks are taught like that. You mentioned Tom, and maybe it's changing a little bit in this era because of all the social media stuff. You can throw 100 different things at the wall, but the bottom line is, when you have success, it's we. When you don't, it's me. Quarterback 101.
Nick Sirianni might be. I know he's the head coach, but Nick Sirianni's making $8 million or whatever it is, 10, 12, 8, 6, whatever it might be. Jalen Hurts is making 55. As far as I'm concerned, he should be the number one guy in there, taking accountability when he needs to take accountability, doing the things he needs to do to be the best leader. Now, maybe he is doing some of that behind the scenes. I don't have the benefit of knowing that answer, but to Johnny Mac's point, he certainly never publicly.
And by the way, I'm criticizing by and large. I think he's a tremendous leader. I think that's been one of his strengths as a player, but that doesn't mean it's perfect. And there was a glaring example of when it wasn't perfect, and he needs to learn from that. And if it happens again, hopefully it doesn't happen again, because hopefully he learns the on-field lesson first. But yeah, if another situation comes up where, he makes a mistake, don't let the quarterback, the coach hang out, because Nick Sirianni's going to defend him. And Eagles fans should like that, I would think. But he's never going to throw him under the bus. But you can help your coach out if you don't want your coach to look bad. Does he not care? I don't know. Only Jalen knows.
Yeah, that's true. Let me get to the super chat. And there's one other chat I want to address. Is that true? And I know we kind of hit on this, but I do want to give James some love because $10 dropping the super chats. We appreciate you guys in the chat. The contributions to the show are huge. And if you do contribute, I will always get to it no matter what on the super chat. When there's no guest on the show, I will always address it. So thank you, James, for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Is it true, confirmed, Cliff wanted to put Stout out? We kind of addressed that, John, but is that true? Because I do think Cliff would have fit Jalen Hurts better. But
I do not think it specifically had anything to do with Stout, but he certainly wanted. I think everybody knows in Philadelphia, if they're coming in, they're getting Stoutland at this point. And I think he would have been fine with Stoutland. I think, again, it wasn't just Stoutland. We're talking about multiple coaches. We're talking about Patullo's 1, Singleton's 2, Moorhead's 3, Michael's 4, Paganetti's 5. So you're talking about 5 more assistant coaches. Might not even have been all of them, but certainly he would have wanted, probably 3 or more or something in that range of people that he wanted to choose. And by the way, when that part of it is true, and that part of it I've confirmed, there was no guarantee that the Eagles were going to hire Cliff Kingsbury. But once he sort of balked at that, they turned in a different direction. So it wasn't like they were going to 100% hire him. I do think ultimately, if he would have agreed, he probably would have been the first choice, but that's just speculation from that standpoint.
And then one other thing I want to address, Jared Ford in the chat. Jared, thanks for joining the show, man. Thanks for watching. We appreciate it. Jalen Hurts doesn't play defense, and he was ripping us a little bit for, 31st ranked defense.
I know.
Look, we just talked about the offense. I just want to say this. The game that mattered most, forget the regular season collapse. I don't even care about it. You made it to the playoffs. That's what you want to do. When the playoffs start, it's a new season. Go rewatch that Bucs game. That offense was putrid. We put up 9 points versus the lowly Buccaneers. So I get it. The defense wasn't great last year. They got to be better. I get it. I get all the spiel. I get everything you want to talk about. But when you score 9 points in a playoff game, I don't want to hear it. I'm sorry. I don't want to hear it about the defense because you got to be better on offense to win in the modern NFL. It goes back to our point earlier. You got to be a high-octane offense to win. They weren't. So you can't just absolve them of any criticism because the defense was terrible. Yeah, the defense was terrible, but the offense was too when it really mattered in that playoff.
Well, they didn't have AJ in the Tampa game. I think that hurts. He got hurt in week 18. Jalen actually, statistically was okay. But yeah, if you see the game, that was, and again,
that was ugly, John.
Tampa, has it's an older stadium. So, some of the Eagles, people were right behind us in the press box. And, I don't tell people who, but there was a pretty high level executive who, it's about third quarter-ish said, fucking embarrassing. That performance. So everybody had a piece of it to the point where I went to Tampa and I tell the story flying down. I'm like, there's no way they're going to fire Nick Sirianni. I thought that was silly. And then coming back, I'm like,
I remember
they
that.
might fire Nick Sirianni. That's how ugly that performance was. Offense, defense. Yeah. The tackling, everything. Defense was certainly worse. Offense was not very good. Look, I get it. People toggle back and forth. We were just criticizing the offense. And then I bring up Jalen Hurts. And, you can't which is it? Can't criticize the quarterback. You can criticize the offense, but you can't criticize the quarterback. How does that happen? The defense stinks. I think we're all on board. The defense last year was terrible. But even that, there were moments which I think people forget, and I talk about all the time, especially early in the season, where you thought, all right, there's some good things happening, to the point there were certain fans spiking the football. I told you Sean Desai was going to be better than Jonathan Gannon. They played well in Tampa during the regular season, was tremendous. The second half against the Rams, the Dolphins game, they were a week or two off, wherever it was, 72 weeks, I think, off the 70-point game, and they played well. And all of a sudden, things start going in a negative direction. And again, I'd look at Jeffrey Lurie, Nick Sirianni, Howie Roseman, whoever you want to blame, feel free. Look, if you're hiring, in the case of Brian Johnson, a first-time NFL coordinator, in the case of Sean Desai, a very inexperienced coordinator, 1 year, and you don't expect growing pains, that's on you. That's on you. You should have hired And they would have hired Vic. So that part, the timing didn't work out. But guess what? Happens all the time. Act like it's the only thing that happens to you. It happens all the time. After they won the Super Bowl, they lost Frank and John DiFilippo right away. Did that suck? Of course it sucked. That's the price of success.
I think Doug is a better head coach than Nick, though. I really do.
Well, I like them both.
I do too, but Doug has that, and maybe it's just because I'm an Eagle fan and he won the damn Super Bowl, and I'm certainly open to that being an explanation for why I like him better. I'm not going to dismiss that, but to me, he has the aura, he has the adult, he has what I want to see out of my head coach. And you can criticize for what he did wrong, because I agree. Press Taylor, not great, but Doug, to me, I never worried when Frank left because I knew that Doug was going to figure it out. Whether he did or not, I don't know, but or that's up for debate. But I trusted my instinct that I thought Doug Pederson was going to get the job done, was going to man the ship. I don't feel that
Doug earned the right. I would say Doug earned the right. I've said it pretty consistently to, if he wanted to hire Press Taylor, he should have been able to hire Press Taylor. And if that fails, then great, then move on. But he should have been given that opportunity. And whether it's Matt Burke or Corey Unlin, and Jim Schwartz, who knows? If Jim Schwartz is a smart guy, man, and he knew the writing on the wall, and he retired.
Yeah, he dipped.
Just like Devonte Parker. Don't think Devonte won't be back at some point.
Yeah.
He retired because he knew what was coming. And obviously his retirement lasted a very short time. Now, again, one of the best defensive coordinators in football in Cleveland. He knew what was coming. And if he knew that Jeffrey Lurie was more amenable to keeping Doug Pederson and allowing him to go the way he wanted to go, maybe Jim Schwartz doesn't leave.
Right.
So Doug earned the right and didn't get the right. So that's I criticized Jeffrey pretty consistently over that.
To this day, we're 5 years removed, maybe 5 years removed, maybe four or 5 years removed from Doug Pederson. To this day, I still think about that and shake my head. I want to thank Jared Ford. We went back to his comments. Jared, thanks for watching the show, man. We appreciate everybody who watches the show. Make sure you guys do like the show if you're enjoying Birds 365. It's the best thing you can do to help us grow. So we appreciate all of our chat, all the people in here. We appreciate it. John, before we get to a break, and we're going to take one more break before we get out of here, but I got to ask, and it's just about what you just talked about there, because we give the organization credit a lot when they deserve it. Jeffrey Lurie, we talk about him as the best owner the Eagles have ever had. I think that's undisputed. I think that's correct. But why the heck? I mean, I don't want to relive the past right now, but why would we get rid of him? We have one Super Bowl in the Super Bowl era. One stinking Super Bowl. One.
Well, it's not easy to win. It's not easy to win the Super Bowl.
I know it is, but to your point, we had a guy that not only did he win the Super Bowl, he took Nick Foles and went up against it's like David versus Goliath here. Went up against Brady and Bell. He didn't beat Jimmy Garoppolo. He beat Brady. He threw for 550 yards. And then, he wants to hire his offensive coordinator. He's out the door. Like, I to this day, I think about that, and I'm like, that will always be my biggest knock on Jeffrey Lurie, and I guess you could say Howie Roseman too. I don't get it. I do not understand it for the life of me.
Well, yeah, don't blame Howie for that. I mean, when it comes coaching, it's all Jeffrey when it comes to the head coach and deciding whether he's going to move on or not. But I mean, it's if there's one thing that I pretty consistently, he scapegoats people too quickly, and maybe that's the modern era we live in, the social media and all that stuff, when there's, it's very tough in a public facing industry, and he's not the only one. Everybody in the NFL does this. And why do they do this? Because these are some smart people that have made billions of dollars. And in their real industries, most of them, some of it's inheritance, obviously, a lot of it from some of them, but there's a lot of good business people as well. And they're a lot more patient in their normal businesses than they are in the NFL, because nobody's printing in the paper that they're dumbasses because they're keeping the head coach or they're keeping their CEO. Nobody's printing that. Maybe a business magazine says something, but it isn't a microscope. They're under a microscope, and it is very difficult to be patient. And Jeffrey's more patient than most, believe it or not. But he's still too quick to scapegoat. You saw it again this offseason. I'm not saying, clearly there was something else going on with Sean Desai. And I don't know what it was. Keep hearing the word presence, and maybe he just didn't have the presence to be a defensive coordinator. And if you believe that, you got to move on. You don't have to move on in season, but you got to move on. And certainly when they're able to get Vic Fangio, that should be fixed. In the case of Brian, it's much more difficult. But again, I just go back to, if you're hiring a guy with no experience and not expecting growing pains, well, that to me is dumb. That's dumb. So if you wanted a veteran coordinator, you should have hired one last year. Now, they would argue, well, it was late. We went to the Super Bowl, and it was, but come on. There is no rule where you can't go out now and hire somebody for a coordinator job as long as it's a promotion. So you could have taken your time and you could have gone in a different direction and gotten a veteran guy, more of a veteran presence. They didn't do that. And the fact that they're 10-1 and then they collapse and all of a sudden they got to find somebody to blame. Great. All right. We'll see how it works out with Kellen Moore and all that kind of stuff, and all the things with Nick Sirianni and trying to mesh two things together. Maybe it works. It's not impossible. To me, on paper, it doesn't make sense. That doesn't mean it can't work. But he's too quick to scapegoat. I think his history shows that. And I remember sitting in a Minneapolis bar. Bob Ford was there. Marcus Hayes was there. Our buddy Mike Gill was there. Some other people. And I remember saying, lifetime dispensation if this guy wins this game.
How about 2 year?
Yeah, 3 years, but still. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's unbelievable. They have one Super Bowl win, as you point out. They've won. They've won. And by the way, Jeffrey's not the only one. A bunch of fans went and dug out. I mean, that's the way.
Yeah,
that's
how
quickly.
Sure enough points out Doug's staff selection was awful, but I agree with you. Like, even if it was awful, he deserved the ability to make the decision. If it failed, okay, but he didn't even have the ability to make that decision.
Yeah. Well, his staff selection was awful. I mean, what? No offense to anybody, but what makes you think you have the expertise to understand his staff selection was awful?
I think Doug was the architect of the offense.
The Eagles for years would say Press Taylor is a future star, and Doug didn't even hire Press Taylor. Chip Kelly hired Press Taylor, and he was going to be this bright young offensive mind. And by the way, he found the Philly special and all that stuff. And he called it from a meaningless Week 17 game where the Bears ran it against the Vikings, both shitty teams, but it was a nice play. And he said, hey, we should put this in the offense. Press Taylor found that. And he was a star and rising star right up until Doug took an interest in him. And then it becomes, oh, he's an idiot. Come on, don't buy that stuff. When they try to sell and kick people in the ass out the door. Same thing with Mike Rowe. Yeah, no, it's an ugly part of the industry.
Jags, as long as Doug is in Jacksonville, they will be my AFC team if I have to pick one, just because I love Doug Pederson so much. Shout out to you, Doug. Shout out to SMD Eagles. No doubt about it, the best fan base in the NFL. Johnny Mack can't even debate me on that one. Eagles fans make the show possible. So we appreciate it. This is actually an interesting point, but I'm not sold on this, Johnny Mack. Well, he was married to Wentz, and clearly it was time for Wentz to go. I actually think Doug Peterson would have been tremendous with Jalen Hurts. You saw a little
Jalen loved Doug.
Yeah, I mean, remember that Cardinals game, Jalen's rookie year? Jalen threw the ball really well. I mean, and he was a rookie. He wasn't even the improved Jalen Hurts at that time. I would have loved to see Doug with Jalen Hurts. I think that would have been a great combination, and I think Jalen and Doug both would have benefited from it, but we never got a chance to see it, and that's how it ended. So I don't want to relive the past too much today. Let's take a commercial break. We only got 13 minutes left to play on Birds 365. I want to ask Johnny Mack, full day tomorrow. Johnny Mack is a full day. I know it's just going to be an hour or so, but still, it's better than 10 minutes.
I don't know. I'm just projecting. The Eagles are obviously changing things. Maybe it's a little bit longer. Maybe it's an hour and a half. But anyway, anytime we get to see practice, it's a good day because you get to get information. And I wasn't expecting it, so it's good that it's coming.
Yep, we'll get to see that tomorrow. So Johnny Mack will be heading down there after the show tomorrow. And then we'll have a great Thursday and Friday edition of Birds 365 discussing what we're seeing, what Johnny Mack saw, what's going on at OTAs. Maybe we'll have some developments on the position battles and really even maybe the scheme. You might be able to see a couple things from the new coordinators and what they're doing on the offense. So should be pretty good stuff. I want to remind everybody to like the show. We're going to hit a commercial break. We'll be right back to close out this Tuesday edition of Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
Listen, if we even think you owe us money, you won't know what hit you. We'll put liens on everything you own. Raid your bank accounts, retirement fund, pension. You'll open up your paycheck and cry because we'll already have the money. We'll haul you into federal court and you might even go to jail. Hey, it's our job.
Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. Our experts will fight for you using IRS guidelines to stop any IRS actions like bank levies or wage garnishments. Plus, eliminate penalties and interest and reduce your past tax bill so you pay the IRS less. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a tax doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
I'd have my mom call the number on the screen. You come see me alone. We'll work it out.
EAGLES. Eagles.
Coming back on Tuesday's edition of Birds 365. We'll be wrapping up the show here in the next 10 minutes. Johnny Mac set to head down to OTAs tomorrow for their first opening to the reporters. So Johnny Mac will have his first look at the Eagles rookies. Not his first look, but an inside look, a good hour at least, hopefully, with the team on the practice field to be able to see some guys playing. Johnny Mac, what are you looking forward to seeing tomorrow, if anything? I think some of the position battles are sticking out to me. But what are you looking forward to seeing tomorrow down at NovaCare?
Yeah, first, Zach Bond, I think, number one, just try to figure out what they're going to do with him. And maybe he's that versatile where he can play both. But I mean, that flat defender, hook defender, whatever you want to call it, in big system is a pretty big deal. So the edge rusher that can drop in coverage that fans love so much. It's a big deal in his team. And Andrew Van Ginkel is the guy that Howie compared Zach Bond to, had a tremendous year, breakout year in Miami last year, could do both, could rush the passer, very good in coverage. Got him, I think, about $10 million in free agency. So he had a big year under Vic Fangio. Not saying Zach Bond can become that player, not saying he's even going to be that player, because Vic said he likes him at all-ball linebacker. So he's going to be interesting to me. Isaiah Rodgers is going to be interesting to me. Where do they start with him? How quickly can some of those fifth-round picks get in the mix? It seems like that's going to be a big story over the summer, because there's opportunity. There's rare. I don't like, to me, Matt Hennessy is, if he's healthy, he's a good NFL player. He's already proven that, but he hasn't played essentially much football in 2 years. So it's a big projection. And he's going to be the interior backup in my mind. So he can play anywhere. He can play center. He can play left guard. He can play right guard. And I think at certainly a competent level. But from a standpoint of just practice reps, if he's the backup center, he's the backup center.
Yeah. Do you think that's going to keep him out of the right guard position just because they might?
Well, I do think early. And I think it's going to be, obviously, Tyler Steen, and they're hopeful that Tyler Steen seizes the job. And I think it's going to be Keegan as the second team right guard. And I want to see if that's the case. I think it's going to be. And then if they both bail, I go back to last year in safety when, they were rotating safeties next to Reed Blankenship daily. And then all of a sudden at the end of camp, it became Justin Evans. And I remember Jody and I would talk about it all the time. And I said, well, this defense, you need the coverage safety. And they tried Terrell Edmonds, and they tried Kayvon Wallace. And who was the third one? I'm forgetting. There was a third one. And they kept rotating them day after day after day. And Justin Evans was just kind of there on the second team. And all of a sudden, about 10 days before the start of the season, he wins the job. He starts taking the first team reps, and because he was a coverage guy. Unfortunately, he's also a guy who's always hurt. So, but for people that forget, he was the starting safety for the first 4 games, I believe, before the injuries took over. And that's a similar situation I see with Hennessy. He's going to be the backup center. And then if Tyler Steen and Trevor Keegan fail, then they'll just move him over. And they know as a veteran player, he'll be able to hit that pretty seamlessly.
Let's go to our friend Wilfredo. John is the best, not even close. There you go, Johnny Mac. The haters might be louder, but there are just as many, if not more, people that love.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I appreciate
the opinion of Johnny Mac. Johnny Mac, you are one of the best in the business. And we appreciate Wilfredo for being here and joining the show this morning and dropping us a super chat. So thanks, Wilfredo. Well, some good stuff going into OTAs, John. A lot of good things to look forward to. I got to be honest, though. If you told me a couple weeks ago, even or a month ago, before Vic spoke, the number one thing you'd be watching before your first OTA was
I know,
Zach
exactly.
Bond.
Well, don't get me wrong. There's bigger stories, but I just get in the weeds.
Yeah.
I'm just interested in.
Well, yeah, and Vic kind of planted that seed. You're not the only one. A lot of people have been talking about Zach Bond since Vic went that route. Even Bill.
Any of us saw it coming, and I was trying to because that was when Vic was reaching for his roster, and I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe he just. Couldn't come up. Maybe he's going to be in the Van Ginkel role, and he just kind of was reaching for names because let's be honest, the Eagles are not great at off-ball linebacker.
Yeah,
he knows it better than anybody, and maybe that's the reason. That's why I'm so interested to see, or if it's real and he believes he can play there. Because if he believes he can play there, he's got a chance to be a starting linebacker. Simple as that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the same conversation as the Trotter conversation, just from the perspective of there's nobody there. So if he can play competently, I mean, he's going to be the starter. I'll pull Vic. Zach Bond.
No, well, that's the thing. He had Zach's name ready to go.
Yeah, and then he had to get everybody.
And
out.
then he had N'Kobe's name ready to go. But N'Kobe, I don't even. That's another thing. James Bradbury is even going to be there. I don't know why he would be there. He's a real professional if he shows up, by the way. N'Kobe Dean, I don't even know if he's going to be ready to go. He said he was fully cleared or very close to, but they may play it cautious. Obviously, Sidney Brown's not going to be ready at this stage. And so, that gives you an opportunity to look at some of the younger players and, the safety. I should have brought that up with safety. We talked about it a little bit yesterday, and I know we got to go, but
you're good.
They have so many bodies at cornerback, and some of them can play safety. So maybe they keep more because they're gonna have to cut good players at corner.
Yeah,
Josh Jobe, they're gonna have to cut unless they figure out something and say, well, if we have Devonte, he can play safety. He could be the force safety.
Right. So they might put emphasis on those back end corners, the ones that are versatile and could potentially play both.
Yeah, and then you get to keep you have an extra body in the cornerbacks situation on paper, and it would allow you to keep a great special teams player. Eli Ricks, I mean, the other end of the spectrum. The Eagles love his natural coverage skills. Can he hold up and run support? But he's not a very good special teams player at this stage. But it's more important to find people that can cover in this league than it is to find somebody who can cover kicks. So that's why Ricks was here last year. It's Mekhi Gardner was a better special teams player, but they kept Ricks.
Right.
And they got Mekhi.
I actually thought Ricks was decent last year for what it's worth, honestly.
Yeah, well, coverage wise, he's a natural coverage player.
Yeah.
And he was out of position too. So that was difficult. There's not too many 6'2" slot corners in the NFL.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see how it all breaks out. Johnny Mack will be heading down to NovaCare tomorrow. So good stuff. We'll have an action-packed Birds 365 tomorrow. We got 2 guests lined up for tomorrow. And then, like I said, Thursday and Friday is going to be 2 great shows because I'm really going to be able to, Johnny Mack is going to have some things that he's going to see down there that we'll be able to react to. And it will obviously create more topics of conversation as we feed off of what he sees and what happens out on the field. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in today on Birds 365. The show is not possible without everybody in the chat room. So we appreciate all of you guys for your support. Make sure you like the show on the way out. Johnny Mack and I will be back in 22 hours, as Jody used to say. 22 hours from now, we'll be back on Wednesday's edition of Birds 365. Thanks, everybody. And Johnny Mack, thank you, sir. Good show today. I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Thanks, everybody.
Catch you tomorrow, everybody. See ya.
You've been listening to Birds 365.
the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 360.